Hello, my name is Whitaker Adams. And today I'm going to be covering the six major periods of music. So, the first period I'm going to cover today is the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. It's definitely the longest period. It goes from about 500 AD to about 1600 AD, so about 1100 years. Some of the famous composers from this area, we have Pope Gregory, and he's known really well for codifying the Gregorian chant. We have Hildegard, which, I mean, he can be tied to the Gregorian chant, but it definitely has more of a swinging melody. We also have Tio Sasato. He's one of my favorite composers from the era, because he was willing to do religious pieces as well as non-religious pieces, and that's something you don't even really see today, which I think is pretty admirable. Some culture from the period. The printing press was invented, which allowed for the printing of music sheets and music notations. It's also such a long period that we start to see culture really flourish. And you kind of see music take that front stage. In fact, music surpassed religion and language in terms of influence for this period. We have education. Education leads to smarter people, and smarter people like smarter stuff. Simple notes don't really do it anymore. That's why we start to see polyphonies emerge during this period. We also see music become a large part of religious worship. And we also see, I like to look at it from more of an economic standpoint. So we have music kind of become a product in society. And you see these merchant classes and the elites rise, and they become high consumers of the product. I think that's really one of the things that led to the major success of music. Some musical features from the period. We have the Gregorian chant. Always has a monophonic texture. But as time went on through the period, we start to see it take more progressive leaps. We also, as I said earlier, the polyphony emerges, becomes popular due to the need for more singers, a high contrast to the monophony, which was credited for its success. Instruments start being used, although it's fairly basic, and word painting also becomes very popular. So after the Middle Ages and Renaissance, we're going to move into the Baroque period. It's going to be about 175 years from 1600 to 1775. Some of the famous composers, we have, bear with me, Chiara Margherita da Castellani. She was a nun, and she had three collections of music, vespers, motets, and dialogues. We also see Bach, one of the most famous composers ever. We also see Tony Vivaldi. He's known as the father of the concerto, and he was a priest. Some of the culture during this period. We really see music, we really see culture, start to focus around human expression and emotions. Most of these countries are monarchies, which led to a lot of wars. Countries want to go conquer Britain, imperialism, all that. Scientists like Galileo were discovering things. We found out the Earth wasn't flat, so I think this was an important time. Many common people made their own music in their own homes. And the European exploration really led to a more unified culture around the world. We took parts from other cultures, we gave parts of our cultures, whatever, and it all led to, I wouldn't say it's all one big culture, but they were much more similar than they were beforehand. Some of the musical features during this period, we really start to see the homophonic texture start to emerge. Just like the culture, the music becomes more emotional. We start to see major, minor tones, musical notation, indicated chords, driving rhythms, all start to emerge as well. And the making of instruments became much more advanced, which I think, along with and that along with better singing techniques, we saw the first operas start to come about as well. So our next period is going to be the classical period. Some of the famous composers from this era, Joseph Haydn, he was Austrian, and he's well known for directing orchestra, opera, and even marionette theater. Another famous composer, we also have Mozart. Everyone knows Mozart, well known for his work on the piano. He's also from Austria. We also have the German Beethoven. So two of the most well-known composers almost ever are from this period. Some of the culture was ruled by aristocrats, which was a product of the previous era. The monarchs, people have this, divine right. I'm built to rule, whatever. We also see the Industrial Revolution during this time. This is credited a lot towards music. It was a rough time for a lot of people, but it also led to a lot of inventions, making things more efficiently, and it made a lot of instruments better too. There's also a revive in ancient Greek ideologies. And that's why this music time period, and this time period in general, is known as the time of logic and reason. Some of the music features from this period, it's known as the age of exploration in music, which I think is pretty neat. We see a lot of melodies, symmetrical 4-bar phrases, repetition and structure become much more balanced. Steady tempos. We see the use of folk tales, popular elements, fairy tales, all those kinds of things. Something I think is very notable is music started being played in concert halls rather than just in the palaces, meaning that music wasn't just for the elites anymore. Music was now also for the common people. Our next era is going to be the Romantic era. Some famous composers, Franz Schubert, he's from Vienna, he's in the Vienna Boys Choir, didn't really make it as a teacher, ended up being a great composer. We have Peter Shabowski. He's a very interesting and honestly inspiring guy. He was a closeted homosexual, which was very hard to be at that time. But he wrote The Nutcracker, and he was very successful, but he was never truly happy. And it's a very interesting story to look into. We also have Scott Joplin. He was really late in this era, but he's from Texas, and he was known as the King of Ragtime, which was a super popular genre for this time. Some culture really focused on individual expression. We also see some rebellion. That's mostly because these artists weren't necessarily going with the flow. They were kind of going against society, kind of like a musical enlightenment, if you will. Some musical features. We have larger orchestras, new instruments that weren't in operas and orchestras got added into those. Timbres became varied. We also had some musical vocabulary get expanded. The ranges varied. Marked lyricism. Music became more chromatic, and we also started to see solos and harmonizing all within the same songs. So it was a very innovative time for music. So following the Romanticism, we see the Modernist era. Some famous composers: Arnold Schoenberg, a big expressionist composer. Aaron Copland, he was born in Brooklyn, born to Jewish immigrant parents, and he was a victim, like many of the time, just falsely accused of being a communist. Really rough for him, but he was a wonderful artist. Bela Bartok, she was a pianist from Hungary, and she had some beautiful works. Some culture from the period. We went through World War I and World War II. The Great Depression. These things created a great sense of nationalism, patriotism. There's a lot of music, like the USO shows. where it was played for the military, all that kind of stuff, versus nationalist, you know, go your country music. Um, we also see a little bit of the Harlem Renaissance as well. Some of the features from this era. There's more complexity to the music. Um, like I said earlier, as people get smarter, music gets smarter. More shifting in the meter. Uh, the melody comes from the instruments as opposed to the voice. That was a big change. Um, Honestly, kind of the start of the hip hop movement. Uh, it's dissonant. There's increased tension, and strings are no longer the heart of the orchestra. Brass and woodwinds kind of take over there. So here we are, the last of the 6 eras. It's the postmodernism. My favorite, personally. Some of the composers we're going to look at: John Cage, he's very experimental, invented the prepared piano. Steve Reich, born in New York, very influential artist for the 20th and even the 21st century. We also have John Adams, an American composer who went to Harvard. Culture for this time, lots of things. Red Scare, civil rights movements of the 60s, the Vietnam War, all the protests for peace from that, the Woodstock Music Festival. Drug culture was also very big, especially 70s, 80s. We also have feminism. And something very important for this time is we see music really start to become a form of protest. Fortunate Son, all those kind of things. So music features. It's very highly accessible. Music had always been accessible, but now with electronics, it became even more accessible. Radios, stuff like that, were very common. And the use of electronic tools. I mean, nowadays, people don't even need to have any instruments to make a song. It's all in a computer. It's pretty neat. That's all for my presentation, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.